Alright, episode 11, where to begin? I won't start with the obvious, instead I'll start with George Michael. Now, why do I have George Michael playing in this review? I'd really like to make some sort of claim to extreme cleverness and say it's a really obscure reference to something, but no. It might have been a slight allusion to the use of not particularly hardcore or manly music that's usually featured in angry reviews. But mostly it was just the song I was into at that point. I went through a weird phase of 80s pop music, and this moment just kind of happened to be, I guess, the peak of it. The song is kind of a useful motif though. It provides a helpful background hint that when switching timelines, we've stepped backwards in time slightly because the song's playing again. Sure, this is, a parody, and the double timeline shit isn't nearly as confusing as Boars suggests it is, but as far as following the internal logic of this video as a story, which you might, it's a nice little, I guess, filmmaking device. Now, the t-shirt. God damn it, the t-shirt. Now, the Irat Gamer mentioning buying the official DVD and t-shirt was a pretty common thing, but I had an extremely clever idea at this point that I could make a cheap-ass looking shirt with paper stuck to the front and really bring the funnies by telling people to buy this cheap looking t-shirt. But then that bastard the Game Boob just had to have the idea and include the exact same looking cheap ass shirt a few months before I posted this video. I really did think I was extraordinarily clever for coming up with that, but no, I was still ripping someone off, even though this time it was unwittingly. I'll admit that a lot of the Irat Gamer was ripped off from other Irat Gamer parodies. This one was possibly one of the few that was completely unintentional though. Alright, now the voice, probably the most controversial part of this episode. Really, throughout the Irat Gamer, I'd gotten a lot of negative comments concerning the voice, like ruining the episodes. And I suppose I thought it was kind of unanimous that the voice was just a barrier to enjoying the episodes. So by this point, and kind of going into this episode, I had this idea that no matter what I was going to do, I was not going to use the same voice that I'd been using for the last 10 episodes. And I attempted two things actually. The first one was, thanks to doing video game reviews on my other channel, which I shamelessly plugged on this channel quite often at that point, I was actually pretty comfortable with my voice at this point. So I initially recorded this episode trying to basically do my best Chris Boars impression.
Welcome to another episode of Irat Gamer Neo. But hold the phone for a second, let's just have a look at the title of this show. Neo? I guess calling it Need-the just didn't have enough pizzazz to it.
Something about it didn't really sit right though. Maybe I just wasn't that comfortable with my voice yet, or maybe I just thought that my impression of Boars wasn't that great. For whatever reason, I opted to use a different voice again. This time it was the clean and clear Neo speech Paul. The only remaining snippet of my real voice performance is the little sniffle when the Irat Gamer smells his computer's recycle bin.
What's that smell?
What's that smell?
Then when this episode came out, people kind of started criticizing the new voice, saying they missed the old one. And this really confused me at the time. I was like, what do you want from me? It was meant to be kind of like my improvement, me answering the criticism. And at the time, it kind of seemed like I couldn't really win. But eventually, I kind of figured that the people who were complaining about the voice weren't, the subscribers and weren't the consistent viewers and the people who are actually enjoying the Irat Gamer. And the people who had accepted and gotten used to the voice, they're the people that I should really care about more than, the people that come to the video and say, I don't like this because the voice sucks and then leave. I mean, why should I try and pander to people like that anyway? So the voice change, which was meant to be permanent, ended up being only for that episode because I went back to the trademark Irat Gamer voice afterwards. Let's just say I kind of learned something from this episode, who to kind of listen to when it comes to feedback for certain things. Feedback is great, of course, it helps you improve, but there's probably some feedback that's kind of worth not internalizing too much. And sometimes it's hard to know like what kind of feedback to listen to and what kind of feedback to ignore. But this kind of thing, I guess, kind kind of taught things like that to me. Now this episode just kind of stands as a slight black sheep because of the different voice, but that's okay. This was also the first episode to use the awkwardly framed cropped from the neck down angle, which, despite being shamelessly IGSRJ, was kind of inevitable because it was kind of a staple of the irate gamer parodies that I would watch, the kind of covering of the face thing, even though, you know, those people ripped off IGSRJ as well. Now, mispronunciations are common in irate gamer parodies and, well, the irate gamer. But the mispronunciation New Super Mario Bros. Y is actually kind of an in-joke for me. I had a friend years and years ago growing up who had Super Mario Brothers on his Game Boy and would literally consistently and unironically call it Super Mario Bros. Just because he legitimately didn't know it was actually short for brothers. And for some reason that stuck with me as being really, really funny. I don't think I ever mentioned it to him, but hopefully he doesn't still say Ross like 10 years later. Anyway, a few years later, like maybe a year or two later, I was reading a magazine. I was really into this magazine series called Disney Adventures. And there was an article about the new Nintendo Wii at E3 or some such event. And for months afterwards, I called it, again, literally, consistently, and unironically, the Nintendo Y. I thought to my 10-year-old self, why, no one would be dumb enough to call a console a Wii. I was wrong. And my sister had to kind of convince me that it was indeed called the Wii. And that's embarrassing. But that stuck with me too. And therefore, New Super Mario Bros. Y is a collection of legitimate mispronunciations from childhood naivete, which I like to think the irate gamer has a lot of. Speaking of mispronunciations, flag in Capture to Flag Principle is a very slight reference to Vicious Dave. If I don't know if anyone knows who he is, but he's kind of a vlogger that I never watched, but he was kind of in the circles of the people I watched at one particular time. And in 2008, he was getting kind of a lot of attacks from people, and people were calling him a fag a lot. And so he would reply to that in video form, which is always a good idea, by saying stuff like, "I'm not a fag, you're a fag." Like, he consistently pronounced it fag, and I don't know if it's a regional dialect thing, maybe it is, but that also really stuck with me. So when it came to, I couldn't possibly tell you why, but when it came to writing in, like trying to find a mispronunciation for flag, it kind of just was naturally turned into flag, just as a slight reference to Vicious Dave calling out people and calling him a fag. My choice of Morshu as kind of the sidekick in this episode. I was such a huge fan of No Date Gamers and the Morshu show in general. I thought they were really, really funny, and at one point they kind of inspired me to do my own animations, which sucked so hard I never posted them anywhere. But I just loved so much that he could take such a minor character from such a panned video game and make two like really funny shows featuring this minor character in leading roles. I just thought that was brilliant. So Morshu kind of became my unofficial mascot at the time. Like I would go onto online games and my username would be Morshu and stuff like that. So it was so, again, it was so natural to just have Morshu as my sidekick, and everyone would know who he was by this point. At least I assumed so. Considering all the effort that I've put into set dressing in recent times, I think it's really funny how little effort I put into moving anything in my room. Throughout the episode, you can see all the stuff I've like stuck on walls. There's a clothes basket, there's a MacBook there for some reason, my bed and desk with all this shit on it, whatever this and this is. Like seriously, you could probably spend ridiculous amounts of time analyzing and or psychoanalyzing the content of my room and hallway. That's definitely something I would kind of opt against doing now, but I was lazy. So I will say I think the recycle bin gag is actually pretty funny. It's such an undramatic, anticlimactic thing, even compared to Bors's undramatic, anticlimactic gas pipe. Not only that, but I think it's actually kind of clever how both timelines essentially end the same way as far as the central conflict goes. Like, the recycle bin actually makes no difference to the ending of each storyline, just the presence of Morshu does. One could even, like, argue that the timeline where he told Morshu to go away was the more beneficial one, at least certainly the more emotional one. Speaking of which, the ending is kind of weak. It's not inherently unfunny, but it's just really, really long and drawn out and kind of tonally inappropriate for this sort of parody show. Plus, I didn't really have a camera that could do nighttime anything, so it's somewhat incoherent as well. I'm sure you're all wondering what genius storytelling you all missed in the scenes that were near complete blackness. No, it's just shots of me walking for the epic "I'm walking outside" section of the episode. You didn't miss anything. It's okay. No, I don't mind this episode. The voice and minor flaws in it aside, it's got some decent moments, yeah. Anyway, as always, thanks to everyone who watches and enjoys these commentaries. Feel free to post questions. I'll try to answer them as best and as much as I can. If you haven't already, check out my music. Fun fact, I actually slipped this song off my EP into the Kingdom Hearts review. So go check that out if you haven't already and you like really emo synth pop. I've also started posting some covers that people might find interesting, and I'll be doing other stuff that people also might find interesting. So yeah, so check that out. And anyway, I have a surprise for the next commentary, so stay tuned for the next one soon.